Chapter 2. The research centre was white and clean, despite its muddy surroundings. Law and Xeon entered, and she hastily removed her damp robe and cast it aside casually. A nearby science Dalek looked down at it in annoyance, but thought better of confronting the newly arrived general. Xeon looked at the powerful frame of Law. He didn't rate humans physically, but he did think that she looked formidable, and if she got her bare hands on a travel machine, that she could certainly cause some damage. Law followed Xeon through the white corridors and into a room full of display cases. It looked almost like an art gallery. Everything was arranged neatly and in their own exhibits. She strode past Xeon and gazed in fascination at a large chunk of silver metal. It was intricate and serrated, like ornate armor. She reached absent-minded towards it, as if to touch it, but it was in a containment case. She turned towards Xeon. "These are parts of Cybermen?" she asked. Xeon's eye stalk surveyed around the room.
"This is what we could salvage. Every aspect of a Cyberman reveals new things about them. We have used metallurgic analysis to date the creation of the metal components as far back as 2,000 years ago. They are old."
2,000 years? Law repeated in awe. That went back to before the Daleks even existed as they do now. Before even the Silver Emperor. They're from a bygone age. An era before us. Where did they come from?
"We discovered a hibernation unit buried deep under Caldesis' surface,"
Xeon answered. "I would like to see that," Law remarked.
"That can be arranged, General. What do you make of the specimens?"
Xeon asked. Law wandered around the room. There was a cyber hand, which looked like a thick gauntlet. There was a large booted foot. "You could make that your mascot," remarked Law with a smile. Xeon looked at it in confusion.
"Mascot?"
he repeated. "Cyber stompers? A cyber foot? Seems appropriate and ironic."
"Because we do not have feet with which to stomp. I see. Most amusing,"
Xeon said with no inflection. "Whoa, don't lose control of yourself, Xeon," she jested. Xeon looked at her quizzically, but before he could reply, she continued, "I see there are no heads."
"No, when a Cyberman deactivates, it appears the head is the first thing to self-destruct. A precaution to prevent enemy analysis,"
Xeon said. "That's logical, but unhelpful. If we could sever one before it has the chance to explode, that would help," she said. She thought of her fellow general and friend Ryuk. Were they friends? She often wondered. He was handy with a sword, and she would wager he could sever a Cyberman's head before it had a chance to explode. She was not so precise. She favoured brute strength, and often used blunt instrumentation to enforce it. She wandered over to a small case, which had something small and silver inside. She leant in closer. It was like a metal insect, with a segmented carapace and lots of tiny legs. As she looked at it, it sprang to life and jumped against the side of its prison. She moved back, slightly startled.
"These creatures are employed by the Cybermen as infiltrators and saboteurs. Though easily destroyed, they can be very dangerous and very formidable in large numbers,"
Xeon said.
"We captured this one alive and severed its signal to its own kind. We will soon be dissecting it. The creature is unlikely to survive the process."
"Have the results sent to me immediately after," Law ordered.
"I obey,"
Xeon said.
"The Cybermen are a dangerous adversary, and we know very little. They should not be underestimated. Our last general sacrificed himself to stop them, but was unsuccessful. You saw the psychological damage inflicted on many of our troops. Do not take the threat lightly."
"I appreciate the advice, Xeon," Law said, and she meant it. Too often Daleks would treat her dispassionately, as if she was just a thing. But Xeon spoke to her as an equal. She would need others to do the same, if she was to lead the Ninth Conquest Army effectively. "I've seen enough here. I'd like to visit my chambers, and then later I want a tour of the entire base. Can that be arranged?"
"Of course. Follow me, and I will show you to your chambers,"
Xeon said agreeably. She followed him to leave, but as she did, she saw a small vial filled with dark black liquid, the darkest black she had ever seen. It was a total absence of light. "What is that?" she asked. Xeon looked at it.
"Nothing related to our immediate problem. It is a specimen found on a foreign meteorite that has yet to be analyzed. It is unusual in its molecular makeup,"
he explained. "How so?" she questioned further, leaning in to look at the dark tar-like substance.
"It does not have any recognizable properties. It is unknown. No doubt our science Daleks will get to the bottom of it."
Xeon proceeded out of the room, and Law followed. They followed a long corridor which linked the science facility to the main compound. As they proceeded through, they passed a factory-like area. Material fabrication. She noted that Dalek casings were being constructed, but instead of Daleks manning the controls, there were humans loading the materials, attending the conveyor, and checking the finished machines. They looked slender, malnourished, but they worked effectively, and their eyes had some spark of hope left in them. "You have slaves working the forges?" Law questioned.
Affirmative. Since the attacks and the dwindling of our numbers, General Rodder, your predecessor, thought it prudent to make use of the slaves in order to keep combat-ready Daleks manning the perimeters. We do not want any more surprise attacks,
Xeon explained. "I see," Law said, watching a female human with mousy brown hair struggling to shift the skirt section of a travel machine which had become stuck.
If you do not agree with this method of operation, we can change it to one of your choosing,
Xeon said, but Law was already moving towards the human. "No, that's okay," she said quietly, helping the human to move the piece of travel machine. She lifted it from the conveyor as if it was nothing, and placed it down next to the female. The human female was watching her with wide blue eyes. She was confused. "The conveyor seems to be faulty," Law remarked. She leaned in closely to the female. "Speak," she said softly, but with enough force to be recognized as an order. "Yes," the human said. "I'm sorry. It was heavy, and I'm tired." The human girl was now staring at the ground. The other humans had stopped working and were watching the altercation.
Continue with your work,
ordered Xeon impatiently. The other humans continued working. Law thought of Ryuk's work with the slaves. He had revolutionized the way in which Daleks employed them. No longer just tools to be used and discarded and replaced. Now they were treated almost well. They had room to rest and time to sleep. It had been an effective strategy. Law had originally thought Ryuk had come up with the idea because he was soft, because he empathized with humans and wanted to help them. But she had seen with her own eyes what he did to 2 slaves. He had had them executed without mercy, and as their lives vanished, so too did her doubts of his motives. "You're exhausted. Take a rest period. 50 rels should do it," Law said to the woman, who frowned. "Yes," she said in a small voice.
Address the General properly,
Xeon chided. "General?" the woman said. She looked at Law again, taking in the humanoid form. Her clear femininity, but hard muscles. "But you are not a Dalek," she finished, and then looked at the floor, afraid she had said too much. "I am," Law contradicted, "in all the ways that count. What's your name?" "Ella," said the woman. Law looked at the cobbled clothes she wore. The slaves were now allowed to make their own clothes. Usually these tasks were given to the women, but this woman was doing manual labor. According to the new system, she must have chosen this. "You sure you're cut out for work like this, Ella?" Law asked. "Yes, General," she answered. "It's the belt of the conveyor. It's old and needs replacing." Law turned to Xeon. "See that this conveyor belt is replaced immediately," Law ordered.
Yes, General,
Xeon said. He passed the order onto a nearby Dalek. Law turned back to Ella. "Go. Rest," she prompted. Ella turned and filed out of the room. Law heard the human mutter something under her breath that sounded a lot like "thank you." Her cheeks flushed a little. She was not accustomed to gratitude. Xeon returned and asked,
Would you like to proceed to your chambers now?
Law nodded, and they proceeded.